Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here and happy to talk a little bit about zero trust application access and more specifically device security as part of it and how we at XFA try to solve that. I'll give a little bit of an introduction of XFA in a bit. So I saw that the title, I forgot what title I exactly chose, but basically zero trust application access and how device security is a part of that and how XFA basically solves that as well. So first, a little bit about me. I'm a CTO at XFA. XFA is a cybersecurity company, and we're mainly focusing on device security. So we have a product that solves or tries to solve device security within a company. More on that in a bit. I have a background in information security. I used to be CISO at DPG Media. Yeah, I hold a PhD in cryptography from the Johns Hopkins University. So first of all, what is zero trust? Steve Riley said that the term zero trust is now used so much and so widely that it has almost lost its meaning. And I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the term and how many people in this call already heard of it, but it is a term that is very much used in marketing lately, more than it is in its original meaning, where it is a real security strategy that you can use in a company. Yeah, and I too have like a little bit of a double relationship with the term. I don't like too much the marketing side of it, but it is a very nice concept, and the ideas behind it are very nice to actually build a security strategy within a company. So let's just dive in what zero trust is. So basically, in the past, companies really thought of their network or their infrastructure as some sort of castle, where they had to build a big giant wall around it, which would have been firewalls, and they kind of said everything that is inside it is safe. And that made a lot of sense, you know, when in the 90s we all went to an office where desktop computers were set at our desk and we were working there. It kind of made sense to basically cover that network from the rest of it. But over the years, it became more of a soap bubble because, you know, we started working on mobile devices, laptops, smartphones, and we started working from anywhere. From home or even from, you know, a coffee shop and places like that, on the train, on a plane, you can name it. And especially after the pandemic in 2020, that even became more prevalent in most companies. And at that point, the companies started making kind of holes in their walls to make sure that you could connect from anywhere. You can think of this as like VPN connections, which is the most common way of trying to connect from an external place to the internal network. As you see, I kind of draw these arrows as kind of spears because you're kind of making holes in that in your protection, and it comes with several risks. Also, not all our applications were running in that internal network anymore. We got more and more SaaS applications who were running in the cloud. We're connecting them using just, you know, an account. If you're lucky, it is a company-owned account, but we also see like people creating their own accounts and using software that they like and that they're comfortable with for work. Same with the devices. People just want to use their own device. They don't want, you know, at some point, companies handed out Blackberries to people, but then people just wanted the newest iPhone or an Android device. And it became much harder to actually make sure that everyone was comfortable with the device they were using and still secure. Also, the NSA found out, this is a slide from the Snowden docs, Snowden leak, several years back. And this was the Google cloud. So on the left, you see basically the public internet, where users were connecting with Google, Gmail, Google Docs, Google Maps, and everything was nicely encrypted using HTTPS. And for the users, it seemed very nice. But somewhere at the front of their data center, they kind of, or their network, they kind of removed SSL and inside the internal network, which was not necessarily at one place. You see here, DC stands for data center, and it was several data centers, and the connection between the data centers was not encrypted. The NSA put a smiley on this because they liked that. Obviously, they could still look at the traffic inside the network and not necessarily at the outside. Obviously, this is a very sophisticated organization that has a lot of means to actually intercept that traffic. But this was basically how the internet was built and also how companies worked, which is obviously not great. Nowadays, it got much better, and most of the traffic on the internet and also on networks is at least encrypted using HTTPS at least. But we still struggle somewhat with this model, especially smaller companies or older companies that are not that much on the forefront of the digital transition. So what is then a new approach? And what we are advocating, or what Zero Trust also is advocating, is let's embrace that new reality. Let's just say our applications are in the cloud and you can access them from anywhere with any device. What are the most important parts that you're going to have to protect? That is the question that we have to ask ourselves, and that is also the core approach in Zero Trust. Before I'm going to dive further into the different aspects of Zero Trust, I briefly want to mention the history of Zero Trust. So the term was first coined in 1994 already, when this computer security researcher wrote a doctoral thesis about it. And this was much more about the concept of like, who do we trust? How do we verify stuff? And not necessarily about how to secure a company or anything, but he basically already coined that the fact that, okay, maybe we don't have to trust anyone and we really have to verify everything. That's kind of the basics. And then already quite a few years later, Google was actually attacked by a Chinese APT. APT stands for Advanced. Then what does APT? Advanced Persistent Threat. Sorry. And that was so it was a Chinese attack. It was called Operation Aurora, and they were kind of it was a giant attack on Google, and Google tried to protect themselves against it. But in the aftermath of it, they kind of decided we have to do things differently. And that's when they started to implement a project that they called 𝗵𝗵. And it's basically this Zero Trust idea, which they named differently, and started to implement. That's also when the term Zero Trust model was used by an analyst at Forrester, who was advocating for stricter cybersecurity programs and access control within corporations, and that term started to grow. Google started documented that their journey in Zero Trust in a series of articles that they called that they still call 𝗵𝗵. And this was very interesting actually, because you saw a lot of companies that were taking ideas from Google on how to do security at their company. It is actually very nice if a company like Google that is big, that has a lot of people working on security, be very public about how they do things. And then also in 2018, the NIST, the United States standardization organization, actually published a standard on Zero Trust architecture, which took a lot of the ideas of 𝗵𝗵 and formalized that in a framework that companies could use to actually build their security architecture or their security approach within their company. So then a little bit about Zero Trust network access. So this is a term that was actually coined by Steve Riley at Gartner in 2019, and it was happily adopted by all network security vendors who were seeing their kind of market disappearing of like building firewalls and doing everything at the network level, And I'm not saying that it's fully going to disappear, and firewalls still have their place, especially in data centers and stuff like that, and still for part of protecting your company, but it's not the only thing. And I kind of find it funny because Zero Trust was very much about like, okay, let's forget about the network. Let's assume that everything is just on the internet and everyone can just access resources from anywhere. And then they kind of bolted that together with like saying Zero Trust network access. Yeah, and that is a term that is very much used and that is very much connected to Zero Trust nowadays in marketing and online. That's why I like the term much more Zero Trust application access, because we're not actually accessing the network as such, but we're accessing applications who can still be in a data center somewhere, your own private data center, but most often nowadays they are in the cloud. We actually first, it's funny, we first thought that we came up with the term Zero Trust application access when we started talking about this, me and my colleagues. But later, when we were researching the term, we actually discovered that Riley already used the term. Riley, who invented the Zero Trust network access, and he actually said, in fairness and retrospect, he wished that he used the term Zero Trust application access instead of Zero Trust network access. So he already thought about this. He already, kind of admitted to this mistake. And he now thinks that it's too late. I don't believe it's too late. And we really try to use the term Zero Trust application access because it much more describes what this approach is and what this architecture is all about. So let's dive a little bit into the idea of Zero Trust or the Zero Trust framework. And it's basically built around these 6 pillars. So I usually say start with these four first pillars, which is users, because obviously it becomes very important when you're in the public internet that you have a way to authenticate which user is accessing your application. At this point, it usually is still with username and password, maybe a multi-factor authentication, but you see some very interesting things coming up, such as passkeys and things like that, that improve that authentication level. The second pillar is the devices. I'm going to dive a little deeper into devices soon, because that is our focus as well. But because people are using a device to connect to the application, it is also important, or it remains important, that that device has some level of security at least. And ideally, there is a way of verifying what level of security that device reaches. The network is not entirely gone. It still has a pillar within the Zero Trust framework. That is because things still, float over the network. Data still goes over the network. The most important thing you have to think about when protecting the network is that try to encrypt everything that is going between 2 devices or between a device and a server. And that is where HTTPS comes in, which is very ubiquitous nowadays and is on most applications, on most browsers really enforce that practice. So most of that security around the network is getting kind of solved. There are still some holes and gaps in that protection, but yeah, it is still important. Then the applications, obviously, the applications that you connect to, they have to make sure that they at least do the authentication verification very well and make sure that who connects to the application has actually the authorization of accessing the data that is inside the application, but also that there are no other attack vectors on the application. That's where pen testing comes in, something that Brightest also does, to make sure that applications are kept very secure. And then the 2 last pillars, these are mainly there when you try to scale this approach, when you try to scale this framework. It is important that you start automating things and that you use analytics of all these other things that you do to actually further scale your approach. Obviously, it is not possible to make sure that devices are secure when you are a company of 5,000 people, 10,000 people. You can't manually go device by device to make sure that they are secure, obviously. And there is where automation and analytics comes in. I actually like this mental model a little more, where I kind of, on the left, I have everything which is on the kind of user side, which is their devices, the user itself, the authentication. There is the network in between, and then there is the applications on the right side. And then automation and analytics kind of spans everything. I find this a little easier to think about this, and it also helps to split the security strategy among the different aspects. So I'm not going to go into very much details of every aspect, but I'm going to go into devices just because it is what we do at XFA, and it gives me a segue to talk a little bit about that as well. So devices, the objectives for devices is actually seems rather simple, because nowadays it's not much about, when in the 90s and beginning of 2000s, we kind of had to install antivirus and anti-malware, and it still exists and it still does a good job, but it very much evolved from trying to build something on top of it and doing antivirus to good practices. And one of these good practices, and arguably the most important good practice, is keep your device up to date. And it seems super simple, but sometimes my job is really about telling people to keep their device up to date. And people hate updates. I hate updates. It takes time. It's always at a bad moment and things like that. But unfortunately, it's also the best way to keep yourself secure. Because every time when vulnerabilities are found or in devices, in the operating system, in your browser, once they become public, the vendor rushes to get a patch ready and to make sure that the device becomes secure again, or the operating system becomes secure again. And it is important that you quickly try to update. Quickly, you have some days, you have maybe a week or something like that. But I usually give the example of the big ransomware attack in 2018, already quite a while back, but WannaCry, which is one of the famous ones. Large companies really almost went under because of it. And that particular attack was using a vulnerability in Windows that was patched 1 month earlier. So if all these companies had updated their Windows devices within that month, they wouldn't have been vulnerable to the WannaCry attack. It sounds very simple. It's obviously not that simple, especially if you have to do that in a company of like 10,000 employees, making sure that all these devices get up to date. It is not an easy feat, but it is important. Browsers, same thing, because you're using your browser most of the time now to access applications. It is a very important part of your security, and it enforces a lot of the security best practices as well, and keeping them up to date helps. Then another part which is important is disk encryption, which is the practice of encrypting data on your hard drive of your device, laptop or mobile phone, such that if it is stolen, people can't take out a hard drive and take out the data. Some people think that with a password you're safe. A password alone is not enough. You actually need disk encryption. Luckily, it is built into most OSs these days. Windows, macOS has it. iOS encrypts by default, and Android also has it. So, but it is a matter of enabling it. It is a very important practice. And then backups is something that is important. Nowadays, if the data is mostly in the cloud, it's less important for your own device usually, but if you have a lot of stuff on your local device, it is also still important that you back up in case of an emergency so that you can recover. The tools that you need for this is some enforced way to check this on endpoints. I mean, obviously for yourself, you can easily verify if your device is up to date, if your OS is up to date, browser is up to date, and things like that. But as a company, you want some manner of enforcing this on all endpoints used within the company. A potential solution for this is device management. I'm going to go a little bit more into detail in a minute. Keeping data in the cloud helps. That's what I said about like backups. Then you kind of can rely somewhat on the backups of the cloud provider, depending on which cloud provider you use. But it helps a little bit on making sure that you have a recovery mechanism. Which brings me to what XFA does, and that is basically bringing that a seamless device security towards all devices within a company to protect your full company. And I kind of already alluded on this, but basically what we still see and what statistics still see is that 40% of the devices that are used within a company are still unsafe. And that is really regardless of the strategy at this point. And if you know that 1 out of 3 data breaches or security incidents is still related to devices, it is kind of important that we get that number down and that companies start to protect basically 100% of their devices. The reason why this is still a very high number is because the things that I said, people started working from home, people like to use their own device. Maybe you have, you know, you get a laptop from the company, but you have a phone from your own. Some companies try to manage everything, but then, you know, you have the CEO that says, yeah, but I want to use my own tablet. It's a very common case. And then that tablet is not managed and bad stuff can happen. What we are saying is basically, you maybe want to embrace that flexibility. You want to give people the opportunity to use a device that they like and that is, that they are more used to. But you want some kind of way to verify that these devices are secure. So I also explained this already a little bit, but basically, traditionally, companies try to manage all these devices, make sure, you know, you give a device to your employees, both a laptop and a mobile phone. But that mobile phone is already an aspect that got much more difficult because, you know, people wanted different phones and are more used to a phone and say, no, I don't want a phone from work, but I use my own phone and still connect to, for example, their emails, and as such, accessing maybe sensitive data of the company. Companies try to add a written device policy next to it that said, like, you have to keep your device secure, please sign here, and then everything is fine. Obviously, just a signature hasn't stopped a cyber attack so far, and people are still notoriously bad at keeping their device secure. Also, a lot of people just don't necessarily know how to do it, right? It's, we also have to work around awareness and tell people how what they actually have to do. Companies move to what we call managed devices advanced, is where companies try to push that only managed devices can be used for work. There are several ways of doing that. You can do that in the old way on checking this as part of your network, but I just spent the last 20 minutes on explaining you why we have to forget about a private network. So it's not necessarily the best way. You can also try to push devices towards managed devices at authentication level. And this is something that we kind of also do, but the way we do it is kind of, or where we saw an opportunity is basically, we want to verify these devices that they are secure, but without taking away control of the device. And that is actually very important, because if someone is using their own device, they don't necessarily want their company to take control of that device and be able to wipe it remotely and things like that, because it is your personal device, right? And they also want respect for their privacy. And we kind of build a way where we can verify the device security without taking away control and without impacting private data. How do we do this? We do this basically in 3 stages. We first start with a discovery phase where we kind of discover every device that is used within a company. We do it based on the sign-in logs of Microsoft or Google. In this way, we can really see how many devices a user is using, which of what names these devices have. And this already gives us a map of how big the problem is, how many devices there are, already some information about their security level. The second step, we're going to work around awareness, where we're going to send out emails to everyone and asking them to verify the device. We tell them, you're using this device, we need you to verify it using XFA. You still have to install something, a little app, but again, we're not taking away control. You don't have to give it any permissions where we can actually use to take away control. So it's also very strict on permissions. And then in the final step, we're actually going to enforce it. This enforcement happens on authentication. So when you log in into an application, we're going to do an extra check, which is a device check. So I think I explained most of it, but just a few more details. So that discovery phase basically gets into your sign-in logs from Microsoft or Google. This doesn't have any impact on employees within the company. It's just a connection that we make. It's read-only. And based on that, we can make a first assessment on how well your devices are doing and where there are problems, which already gives you very interesting insights. That second phase, as I explained, awareness is going to request device verification from the users by using an email that already gives them some information about the device and the reasons why it's important that they verify it. And then in the final phase, when you log in, you give still username, password, maybe a second factor, and then basically we kind of add a third factor that is going to verify if the device is indeed up to date, is the browser up to date, is the disk encrypted, and a few other checks. And the company can choose to either give a warning to the users, like, your operating system is out of date, please update to the last version, or give or even block users at a certain point. For example, if you say like, well, if your operating system is more than a month or 2 months or 3 months out of date, then the person cannot log in anymore using that device until they have solved their issue. And that way you can really force every device that is used for work, every device that is accessing the data of your company to be compliant with the security policy that you as a company choose yourself. So yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, if you want the demo, please reach out to me. I'm very happy to set something up specifically and go into more details on how we do this, how this works. I just want to say, because I explained it impacts a lot of people, and it is about all these devices. And our main focus is really to make it as smooth as possible and to make sure that people get also the guidelines to make their device secure. If something is wrong, they actually get guidance for their specific device and their specific setup to make it as compliant with the device security policy. And it's all about that, right? Trying to minimize the impact on your IT support team, but really enable the users to use their own device, but also keep it secure. And that is kind of the idea. I know it's a little part of the full Zero Trust framework, but it is a very important part of it. So that's what we're trying to solve. That's it. Thank you for listening. I'm open for any questions and happy to answer whatever questions you have.
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. If there's any question, now's the time. So either shoot, just unmute yourself and ask it, or type it into the chat and I'll read it out loud for Gijs. So both ways is fine. Any questions?
Yes, hi guys. Thank you for your presentation. Quick question. So how exactly does it work then? Let's say you decide, okay, I'm going to block this application and this device for accessing my application. You're on holiday, you come back, your device is no longer it's no longer possible to access the application. How does it work? Do you see a message saying, okay, you can no longer access the application with this device, or?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, let me just quickly show it.
And then maybe also additionally, let's say that you update it, then how fast can we see it? Does that mean that your device has been updated? Is it the next time that you log in?
So there are a few things. So luckily, Apple released a new version yesterday of their operating system, so I'm actually out of date. So in this example, I'm logging into our AWS environment. We're using the Google IDP. So I'm choosing my account here. I was already logged in, so that's fine. It's now checking my device. It's communicating with the extension. It's a little slow because I just restarted recently, but usually it goes pretty fast. And this is basically what you get. At this point, it is not a blocking policy. It's a warning policy. It says we have a very strict policy. So the update came out yesterday and we have basically 5 days to update it. I still have this button, I'll do this later. because we're in this warning period. If I would have been in a blocking period, I won't be able to do this later until I have fixed it. If I click on it, I get guidelines. I'm not going to show everything now, but that is basically it. Once I do the update, I'm able to log in. Also, when you're on holiday, usually when you come back, there might be an update and things like that. You first are going to have to do it before you can access your resources again. And this is also important. It's not very much about being secure all the time, but it is about pushing the best practices as soon as possible to make sure you are as secure as possible. As an admin, you immediately see this. So there are two ways that XFA is sharing that information with the admin. First of all, it's when you log in at this point, right? It is sharing that information, but it also periodically gives that information. So even if I update and I don't log in again, the admin will get that information within the day, let's say, or yeah, I think it's around 6 hours or something like that it reports. But yeah, so the admin basically gets a very quick update. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And
maybe yeah. No. Please do, Joke. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have an additional question on this. So the enforcement, how does it work exactly? Do you, let's say you have, I don't know, 100 devices accessing your network or your applications. How does it work exactly? Do they need to have the app installed on their device? Or let's say somebody just refuses or forgets or whatever. Do they pop up again, or do they get reminded, or do they just get blocked?
Very good question. Yeah, very good question. So we really much focus on a smooth rollout. So it is not necessarily to roll anything out in advance, also because there might be devices that you don't actually manage, so where you can't roll out anything. So the thing is that the first time that someone logs into an application that you protect with XFA, they will get guidance on how to install XFA. So they really get specific guidance on the type of device and the type of browser they're in to install it. Again, as I said earlier, we're not taking away control, and we're trying to be very transparent about that as well to the user. They get that information while they're going through that installation process. And in this way, you're sure that every device will encounter that moment when they first log in and they first have to install XFA. We do have an option where you can set in a policy that there is a time where you can skip it, so that the user has time to actually say, okay, no, not now, I'll do this later, so that the user has time to still do their work, but also find an appropriate time to install XFA. And the idea is that you kind of move away from that skipping at some point, so that you're sure that every device is at least checked. We're still getting some information about when users skip, so that also the admin sees, like, okay, well, maybe in, let's say, my marketing department, people are skipping all the time. Maybe let's do a little awareness session about that to explain them why it is an important step and why the company is using XFA to protect them.
Yeah, so if they skip a couple of times, then they get blocked eventually. If I understand.
Yeah, at this point it is an on-off, but indeed that's something that that we have on our roadmap as well, where you can say, like, you can skip 5 times or something like that.
Okay.
That is something that we're gonna implement as well, but at this point, it's on-off. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. There's another question from the audience. Is the warning screen only available in English, or is it translated into other languages as well?
It is translated in languages. We have support in Dutch, English, German, Spanish, and that's it, I think. No? Yeah. Something like that. French, yeah, obviously. Yeah.
Okay,
maybe also important to add, we already used XFA on brightest as well, and it's really easy to install. But it's important for all our customers, so it works together with Microsoft 365, for example, or Google. And we just added the XFA extension, and we immediately saw all the devices which were used for our domain, for our Microsoft 365 name, laptop, mobile phone, and immediately also all the software which was outdated. So you immediately see, for example, Google Chrome is no longer up to date for that person. And it took us like 5 minutes to install it. So it can be really beneficial for all our customers. Just wanted to add it.
No, thank you, Steph. That is indeed, and that is that discovery step that I talked about. It only takes a few clicks. It only takes a few minutes, and you have these first insights. It's not as complete as when you actually use XFA, but at least it gives you that first insight, as you explained. And yeah, I think it's important to note it takes not much time, not much of effort, and you can do this within the free month that we give when you start a new account. So there's really nothing stopping you from just trying it out. Make sure, get that first insights. If you see that it only shows managed devices and you basically have everything under control, then fine, then maybe XFA is not right for you. But we haven't seen that yet. At every company that we roll it out, there are popping up devices that they didn't know of. We see people using more devices than they have gotten from the company and things like that. So it is very insightful, and most companies, are a little scared after seeing this first overview. Yeah.
I can imagine. Okay, if there's no other questions, I will take over again. Thank you so much, Gijs, for this session. If there's any questions for Gijs, or you can either contact us and we will transfer, or contact Gijs immediately. So thank you very much for joining, and hope to see you later. Bye-bye.